There are lots of things that you shouldn't do to other people. Lots of ways to mistreat other people. That's not news. But is it ever morally bad to have power that you don't use? I mean, is it ever morally bad to be able to do things that you don't actually do? I think so, and I want to try and maybe talk you into thinking so as well. Now, the power I want to worry about today is social power. Now, power in general, Hobbes said, once upon a time, I think he's right, power in general is just about the present means you have to get and to do things. Social power, though, in particular, social power is about what you're in a position to get and to do, and that getting and that doing requires the cooperation of other people. So Max Weber famously said that we measure your social power by thinking about the likelihood that you can get what you want from others despite their resistance. So we can go with something like this as a rough gloss on social power, that your social power is your ability to get other people to do what you want even if they don't want to. Now, I'm here to talk about the possibility that some social power is bad. But before I do that, I want to admit that there are lots of kinds of social power in the world that are totally fine to have. So if, I can make truly incredible pie, then that's going to give me some social power over people that like truly incredible pies. And I think that's almost certainly totally innocent for me to have the kind of social power that I can gin up by controlling access to really incredible pies. But it is a kind of social power. Why? Well, because if you really like pie, I can use my pie-making skills, perhaps, to overcome your resistance. So maybe I can say, look, if you won't give me $10, then I won't give you so much as a slice of this truly incredible pie. Or maybe, oh, you don't got $10? Well, I could say, walk my dog for me, and I'll give you a slice of this truly incredible pie. But I might be able to use, again, my access, my control of your pie supply to get you to do things that you might not otherwise do, like give me $10 or walk my dog, especially because my dog pulls a lot and it's not really much fun to walk in. But I could say, look, you walk my dog, and at the end of it, slice of this incredible pie. So in a case like that, I can use my pie-making skills as a maker of truly incredible pies to make resistance to me costly, at least a little bit. And I think that's enough to say that I can have social power based on my ability to make truly incredible pies. Now, when you want to talk about how much social power somebody has, I think you should ask at least these two questions. So to know how much social power you have based on your pie-making skills or whatever, we first of all got to find out, well, what can you do to make the resistance of other people costly to them? The resistance to your plans for them. And then we've got to ask, what's it going to cost you to do that? Right? So in the case of the pie maker, what can I do to make your resistance costly? Well, I can withhold your pie access. And what's it going to cost me to do that? Well, it depends. It depends on who you are. It depends about facts about my social environment. So if you come into my pie shop and I know that you're the only person 100 miles who can repair ovens when they break, then I might not be able to make your resistance as costly as someone else who doesn't know how to repair ovens. So I might think, oh, well, I can't just sort of charge you what I might charge someone else for a slice of my incredible pie, because I don't want to make you upset, right? Because then day comes, my oven breaks, you'll be in a position at that point to make my attempt to make your resistance costly itself costly by saying, hey, I know how you treated me when I tried to get some of that incredible pie, and so now I'm not going to fix your oven. All right, then, so we want to know about how much social power somebody has. We have to ask these questions. Now, when we ask these questions, though, not about what I think are obviously innocent kinds of social power, but about other forms of social power, we get really different answers, and I think we'll be in a position to see what makes some social power bad power. So what does social power look like when it's bad? To help us think about this, I think we should recognize that probably just as decent people, we are inclined to think that there are forms of power that no one should have. So I'm just going to take it for granted today that everybody here present is inclined to say that slave masters should not have the power they have over their slaves, that dictators should not have the power they have over their subjects, that patriarchs should not have the kind of power they have over women. I'm going to take that for granted so thoroughly that I'm going to call slave masters and dictators and patriarchs the paradigms. I call them that because if anybody's power is ever bad, their power is bad. Now, if all I wanted to do here today was tell you that slave masters have bad power, I think you'd be within your rights to kind of shrug and walk away, because that's not very controversial. We all knew that coming in. But the reason I think it's important to pay attention to these paradigms is because other people than the paradigms have the kind of power the paradigms have. And if we pay close attention to the power of these paradigms, I think we can extract a kind of structure of their power that will help us to see bad power in places where we might not have expected it. And it'll also put a kind of pressure on us so that if we're inclined to say that these paradigms have a kind of power they shouldn't have, then when we see social power that's structurally the same as theirs, then we'll be pushed to say that that's bad as well. So that's the point of talking about these paradigms. So let's talk about them. The first thing we should note about our paradigms and the kind of power they have, and it's different from the kind of power that our pie maker has, well, it's all about how they can make resistance costly. So in the case of the pie maker, answer the question, how costly can the pie maker make resistance? The answer is not very much, right? You can say, well, no pie for you. But if you're a slave master or a dictator or a patriarch, you are positioned to punish resistance, to make resistance so costly that almost whatever the paradigms demand of us, not doing it is worse for us and can be made worse for us by the slave master, by the dictator, than doing what they say. So, for example, the slave master might say, hey, here's what cooperation with me looks like. You go out in the field every day in unbearable heat and you harvest my crops. And that's really costly for you. Why? Because you work that hard for long and it'll kill you. But slave masters, as one of our paradigms, they can make your refusal to do even things that are really bad for you worse than doing what they say. Because what's worse than a slow death working in the fields? Well, a quick one, being lynched, or having your children sold away from you, or those kinds of punishments that slave masters are equipped to inflict on those who don't cooperate with them. I call this what you can call a sort of don't need to check test for bad power. So the less I need to think about whether I can make your resistance worse than cooperation, then the more likely it is I have bad power over you. So the slave masters, the dictators, the patriarchs, they can punish resistance in such powerful ways, in such costly ways, that they don't really have to think about stuff like whether you like pie. They can just be confident that whatever it is they want you to do, you're going to be strongly motivated to do it because they can make your refusal even worse than doing really bad things on their behalf. So that's the first thing I want to notice about the structure of bad power. The second thing, well, this is a little more tricky. So a lot of political philosophers, when they talk about bad power, they say, well, the thing that makes power bad is that it's arbitrary. And that's not exactly wrong, but I think it's misleading. Because when you talk about arbitrary power, you might think, well, that means that it's not predictable, or you might think, well, it means it's not backed up by good reasons. And I think that bad power can actually be perfectly predictable. That it can be backed up by good reasons. And to make that vivid, I want to look at a little piece of what you might call counterfactual history. So this is the story of Onesimus and the health-conscious master. So, in 1853, an effort to stave off a civil war, the slaveholders of the American South decide, we're going to shake up a little bit. In the future, no more brutality. Got uncooperative slaves, well, bring them up before a judge, try them in accordance with widely publicized laws, and if they're convicted, well, they'll be punished, but humanely, some imprisonment during their off hours. And everybody knows about these reforms. They're done all around. And slaves are even allowed to contest violations, so if a punishment is sufficiently harsh, they can bring the master up on charges. Now, okay, so Onesimus, he's a slave under these conditions, and he's got a bad smoking habit. His master tells him, knock it off. Smoking is bad for you. And he does so out of genuine concern, let's say, for Onesimus' health. But the thing is, Onesimus, well, he likes to smoke, and he keeps doing it on the sly. And when that happens, his master has him arrested, brings him up on charges for insubordination. He's convicted, and the master says, all right, well, you're off hours for the next month. You're going to spend in this correctional facility. Now, what's interesting about this little story to me is I think it shows that bad power can be predictable, that bad power might even be based on good reasons. I mean, the master's power in this case is not unpredictable. I mean, everybody knows that this is what's going to happen if you're not cooperative with the master. And it's not like it's unreasoned or that it's backed up by bad reasons. There are all kind of good reasons to stop smoking. So what is the problem? What is it that makes the master's power bad in this case? Well, I think it's a matter of who is in a position, or who is not in a position, to make the master's use of his power costly. That because the whole machine of the state is lined up to make sure that Onesimus goes to prison if the master sends him to prison, that the master knows that no one's in a position to push back, much less Onesimus. And so the master can think only about what he regards as good reasons to do or to not do whatever he tells Onesimus to do. That it's up to the master how and whether he brings punishment to bear on Onesimus for his insubordination. So that gives us what I call the up to me test for bad power. The more it's up to me whether and how to make your resistance costly, very costly, the more likely it is that I have bad power over you. Now, I want you to notice something. Maybe this is the most important thing I have to say. All I've said so far about bad power, again, it's about what someone can do, not necessarily what they do. So I said, you've got bad power, you can make resistance very costly. Yeah, you can do this in ways that are just sort of up to what you regard as good reasons or not. And that's about what you can do and not what you actually do. But you might think, well, why is it the power that's the problem? Why is our objection to these paradigms about the power they have? Why not just think it's about the terrible things that slave masters and dictators and patriarchs do? Why is that not the issue? And the best short answer I know to that question is, well, just to ask you whether you think it's enough for dictators if they want to do right, to just start being nice? Or if it's in their power, should they not just stop being dictators? I mean, give power to the people. That becoming a nice dictator is not what dictators should do. I mean, better a nice one than a not nice one. But if it's possible for the dictator to stop being a dictator, well, then it seems clear to me that that's what should happen. The same with slave masters, right? We don't want just more gentle and kind and enlightened slave masters. We want slave masters to stop being slave masters, to stop having the kind of power that they have. That if emancipation is on the menu, that's what slaves typically want, not just nicer enslavers. So if you agree with me about that, if you think that just improvements in the character of our paradigms is not enough to diffuse our objections to them, well, then I think you probably agree with me that the kind of power we're talking about is problematic as a kind of power, and not just because of what it might get used to do. Well, in conclusion, you might say, I don't have bad power. I mean, what does this have to do with me? This says nothing to me about my life. And maybe not. Maybe you don't. But I think it's true that there are forms of power around us that share the kind of structure of the really obvious examples of bad power I've talked about today that we're perhaps not as inclined to recognize as such. So if you can fire me at will from the only job I can get, then probably you're in a position to make my resistance to whatever you want me to do more costly than my cooperation. And if that's bad when our paradigms have that kind of power, then it seems to me it's bad when you have that kind of power as well. That if you live in a society where a man can know that he can sexually assault a woman behind a dumpster, and the only cost he'll face for the use of that power is 3-ish months in prison, then that young man has a kind of power that's unjust, even in the same sense that our paradigms. And what is perhaps an even more radical claim I have to make is that it's bad when anyone has that kind of power, right? So you don't have to be this swimmer at Stanford. That other people who perhaps have much better character have the same power, just in virtue of the social system where they live, and that is a problem. We have a tendency, I think, to want to focus our objections to social ills on the bad apples. And that's, in ways, I think, easier to do and less challenging to us as individuals. Because if it's about the bad apples, we don't have to worry about the power we might have. But if there are forms of power that are themselves bad and unjust, and if you can have bad power even as a good person, then we need to worry about more than just the bad apples. We have to worry about ourselves. Thanks.